All right, everybody. Well, I want to welcome you to the call tonight, everybody who can make it. And those of you who didn't make it, you can watch it on the YouTube. And tonight is what Prahlad Maharaj learned in the womb. This would be this chapter and then three more. And we'll be finished with the story of the great demon Hiranyakashipu and, of course, his pure devotee son, Prahlad Maharaj. So we'll start by offering our obeisances, pranams to our spiritual master. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Parashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaudavani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shanyavari Paschachari Shatarani Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pramodichananda Shri Dvaidigidhara Shivasri Gauda Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so this is what Prahlad Maharaj learned in the womb. I think this is chapter 7, if I'm not mistaken. And how many shlokas do we have in this one? How many verses do we have? About 50, I believe, a little over 50.
Well, 55.
55. So I'll take the first, say, 10, and then somebody else grab another 10, and we'll pass it around a little bit if that's okay with you guys. All right? Hare Krishna. So text 1, Narada Muni said, although Prahlad Maharaj was born in a family of asuras, demons, he was the greatest of all devotees. Having thus been questioned by his class friends, the sons of the asuras, he remembered the words spoken to him and replied to his friends as follows. Prahlad Maharaj said, when our father Hiranyakashipu went to Mandachala mountain to execute severe austerities, in his absence, the demigods headed by King Indra made a severe attempt to subdue all the demons in warfare. Alas, as a serpent is eaten by small ants, so the troublesome Hiranyakashipu, who always inflicted miseries upon all types of people, has now been defeated by the reactions of his own sinful activities. Saying this, the demigods headed by King Indra arranged to fight the demons. When the great leaders of the demons, who were being killed one after another, saw the unprecedented exertion of the demigods in fighting, they began to flee, scattering themselves in all directions. Simply to protect their lives, they hastily fled from their homes, their wives, their children, their animals, and household paraphernalia. Paying no heed to all these, the demons simply fled. The victorious demigods plundered the palace of Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons, and destroyed everything within it. Then Indra, king of heaven, arrested my mother, the queen. As she was being led away, crying in fear like a Karari captured by a vulture, the great sage Narada, who at that time had no engagement, appeared on the scene and saw her in that condition. Narada Muni said, O Indra, king of the demons, or demigods, this woman is certainly sinless. You should not drag her off in this merciless way. O great fortunate one, this chaste woman is the wife of another. You must immediately release her. King Indra said, in the womb of this woman, the wife of the demon Hiranyakashipu is the seed of that great demon. Therefore, let her remain in our custody until her child is delivered, and then we shall release her. Narada Muni replied, the child within this woman's womb is faultless and sinless. Indeed, he is a great devotee, a powerful servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you will not be able to kill him. So who would like to pick up there? This is good reading. Anybody want to start with text 11?
I can read.
Please.
Okay. Text 11. When the great Saint Narada Muni had thus spoken, King Indra, being respectful to Narada's words, immediately released my mother. Because of my being a devotee of the Lord, all the demigods circumambulated her. Then they returned to their celestial kingdom. Prahlad Maharaj continued, the great Saint Narada Muni brought my mother to his ashram and assured her of all protection, saying, "My dear child, please remain at my ashram until the arrival of your husband." After accepting the instructions of Devarishi Narad, my mother stayed in his care without fear from any direction, as long as my father, the king of the Daityas, had not become free from his severe austerities. My mother, being pregnant, desired the safety of her embryo and desired to give birth after her husband's arrival. Thus she stayed at Narada Muni's ashram, where she rendered service unto Narada Muni with great devotion. Narada Muni delivered his instructions both to me, who was within the womb, and to my mother, who was engaged in rendering him service. Because he is naturally extremely kind to the fallen souls, being in a transcendental position, he gave instructions on religion and transcendental knowledge. These instructions were free from all material contamination. Because of the long duration of time that has passed, and because of her being a woman and therefore less intelligent, my mother has forgotten all those instructions. But the great sage Narada blessed me, and therefore I could not forget them. Prahlad Maharaj continued, "My dear friends, if you can place your faith in my words, simply by that faith you can also understand transcendental knowledge, just like me, although you are small children. Similarly, a woman can also understand transcendental knowledge and know what is spirit and what is matter. Just as the fruits and flowers of a tree in due course of time undergo 6 changes, birth, existence, growth, transformation, dwindling, and then death, the material body, which is obtained by the spirit soul under different circumstances, undergoes similar changes. However, there are no such changes for the spirit soul. Atma refers to the Supreme Lord or the living entities. Both of them are spiritual, free from birth and death, free from deterioration, and free from material contamination. They are individual. They are the knowers of the external body, and they are the foundation or shelter of everything. They are free from material change. They are self-illuminated. They are the cause of all causes, and they are all-pervading. They have nothing to do with the material body, and therefore they are always uncovered. With these transcendental qualities, one who is actually learned must give up the illusory conception of life, in which one thinks, "I am this material body, and everything in relationship with this body is mine." And that was the text 20.
Okay. Anybody else would like to pick up there at 21? We may come back here in a minute, Ram Raga.
Okay, I can do some for a while.
Okay.
21. An expert geologist can understand where there is gold and by various processes can extract it from the gold ore. Similarly, a spiritually advanced person can understand how the spiritual particle exists within the body, and thus by cultivating spiritual knowledge, he can attain perfection in spiritual life. However, as one who is not expert cannot understand where there is gold, a foolish person who has not cultivated spiritual knowledge cannot understand how the spirit exists within the body. The Lord's 8 separated material energies, the 3 modes of material nature, and the 16 transformations, the 11 senses, and the 5 gross material elements like earth and water, within all these, the one spiritual soul exists as the observer. Therefore, all the great acharyas have concluded that the individual soul is conditioned by these material elements. There are 2 kinds of bodies for every individual soul: a gross body made of 5 gross elements and a subtle body made of 3 subtle elements. Within these bodies, however, is the spirit soul. One must find the soul by analysis, saying, "This is not it, this is not it." Thus one must separate spirit from matter. Sober and expert persons should search for the spirit soul with minds purified through analytical study in terms of the soul's connection with and distinction from all things that undergo creation, maintenance, and destruction. Intelligence can be perceived in three states of activity: wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. The person who perceives these three is to be considered the original master, the ruler, the supreme personality of Godhead. As one can understand the presence of the air by the aromas it carries, so, under the guidance of the supreme personality of Godhead, one can understand the living soul by these three divisions of intelligence. These three divisions, however, are not the soul. They are constituted of the three modes and are born of activities. Through polluted intelligence, one is subjected to the modes of nature, and thus one is conditioned by material existence, like a dreaming state in which one falsely suffers material existence, which is due to ignorance, must be considered unwanted and temporary. Therefore, my dear friends, O sons of the demons, your duty is to take to Krishna consciousness, which can burn the seed of fruitive activities artificially created by the modes of material nature and stop the flow of the intelligence in wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. In other words, when one takes to Krishna consciousness, his ignorance is immediately dissipated. Of the different processes recommended for disentanglement from material life, the one personally explained and accepted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be considered all perfect. That process is the performance of duties by which love for the Supreme Lord develops. One must accept the bona fide spiritual master and render service unto him with great devotion of faith. Whatever one has in one's possession should be offered to the spiritual master, and in the association of saintly persons and devotees, one should worship the Lord, hear the glories of the Lord with faith, glorify transcendental qualities and activity to the Lord, always meditate on the Lord's lotus feet, and worship the deity of the Lord strictly according to the injunction of Sastra and Guru. So that's my 10,
Okay.
I think.
All right. Does anybody else want to grab some of that?
Bhavananda.
Okay, give it a
Here you
try.
go, Bhavananda.
Go, Bob.
One should always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his localized representation as Paramatma, who is situated in the core of every living entity's heart. Thus, one should offer respect to every living entity according to that living entity's position and manifestation. By these activities, as mentioned above, one is able to cut down the influence of the enemies, namely lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and jealousy. And when thus situated, one can render service to the Lord. In this way, one surely attains the platform of loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who is situated in devotional service is certainly the controller of the senses, and thus he is a liberated person. When such a liberated person, the pure devotee, hears of the transcendental qualities and activities of the Lord's incarnations for the performance of various pastimes, his hair stands on end on his body. Okay. Tears fall from his eyes, and in this spiritualization, his voice falters. Sometimes he is very openly, dances, sometimes he sings loudly, and sometimes he cries. Thus he expresses his transcendental jubilation. When a devotee becomes like a person haunted by a ghost, he laughs and very loudly chants about the qualities of the Lord. Sometimes he sits to perform meditation, and he offers respects to every living entity, considering him a devotee of the Lord. Constantly breathing very heavily, he becomes careless of social etiquette, and he loudly chants like a madman, Hare Krishna, O my Lord, O Master of the universe. The devotee is then freed from all material contamination because he constantly thinks of the Lord's pastimes, and because his mind and body have been converted to spiritual qualities. Because of his intense devotional service, his ignorance, material consciousness, and all kinds of material desires are completely burnt to ashes. This is the stage at which one can achieve the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. The real problem of life is repetition of birth and death, which is like a wheel rolling repeatedly up and down. This wheel, however, completely stops when one is in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, by the transcendental bliss realized from constant engagement in devotional service, one is completely liberated from material existence. All learned men know this. Therefore, my dear friends, O sons of the Asuras, immediately begin meditating upon and worshiping the Supreme within everybody's heart.
The super soul.
I'm sorry, the super soul within everyone's heart. Oh, my friends, the sons of Asuras, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his super soul feature, always exists within the core of the hearts of all living entities. Indeed, he is the well-wisher and friend of all living entities, and there is no difficulty in worshiping the Lord. Why then should people not engage in his devotional service? Why are they so addicted to unnecessarily producing artificial paraphernalia for sense gratification? One's riches, beautiful wife, female friends, one's sons and daughters, one's residence, one's domestic animals like cows, elephants, and horses, one's treasury, economic development, and sense gratification. Indeed, even the lifetime in which one can enjoy all these material opulences are certainly temporary and flickering. Since the opportunity of human life is temporary, what benefit can these material opulences give to a sensible man who has understood himself to be eternal? Someone turn pages for me. It is learned from the Vedic literature that by performing great sacrifices, one may elevate himself to the heavenly planets. However, although life on the heavenly planets is hundreds and thousands of times more comfortable than life on Earth, the heavenly planets are not pure
Namala.
Or free from the taint of material existence. The heavenly planets are also temporary, and therefore they are not the goal of life. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, has never been seen nor heard to possess inebriety. Consequently, for your own benefit and self-realization, you must worship the Lord with great devotion and as described in the revealed scriptures. Am I there yet?
Probably, more or less.
Yeah, you did good, Bob. Thank you. It's very, very nice. We're at 41 now. Does anybody else like to read? We've got 55 verses, so there's 15 more to go. So go ahead, please do that, and we'll split them down the middle. You take 7, and we'll leave 7 for whoever might like to read, if there's anyone else.
A materialistic person thinking himself very advanced in intelligence continually acts for economic development, but again and again, as enunciated in the Vedas, he is frustrated by material activities, either in this life or in the next. Indeed, the results one obtains are inevitably the opposite of those one desires. In this material world, every materialist desires to achieve happiness and diminish his distress, and therefore he acts accordingly. Actually, however, one is happy as long as one does not endeavor for happiness. As soon as one begins his activities for happiness, his conditions of distress begin. A living entity desires comfort for his body and makes many plans for this purpose. But actually, the body is the property of others. Indeed, the perishable body embraces the living entity and then leaves him aside. Since the body itself is ultimately meant to become stool or earth, what is the meaning of the paraphernalia related to the body, such as wives, residences, wealth, children, relatives, servants, friends, kingdoms, treasuries, animals, and ministers? They are the temporary. What more can be said about this? All this paraphernalia is very near and dear as long as the body exists. But as soon as the body is destroyed, all things related to the body are also finished. Therefore, actually, one has nothing to do with them, but because of ignorance, one accepts them as valuable. Compared to the ocean of eternal happiness, they are most insignificant. What is the use of such insignificant relationships for the eternal living being? My dear friends, O sons of the Asuras, the living entity receives different types of bodies according to his previous fruitive activities. Thus he is seen to suffer with reference to his particular body in all conditions of life, beginning with his infusion into the womb. Please tell me, therefore, after full consideration, what is the living entity's actual interest in fruitive activities, which result in hardship and misery? The living entity who has received his present body because of his past fruitive activity may earn the results of his actions in this life, but this does not mean that he is liberated from bondage to material bodies. The living entity receives one type of body, and by performing actions with that body, he creates another. Thus he transmigrates from one body to another through repeated birth and death because of his gross ignorance. The four principles of advancement in spiritual life, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, all depend on the disposition of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, my dear friends, follow in the footsteps of devotees. Without desire, fully depend upon the disposition of the Supreme Lord. Worship Him, the Super Soul, in devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is the soul and the super soul of all living entities. Every living entity is a manifestation of his energy in terms of the living soul and the material body. Therefore, the Lord is the most dear, and he is the supreme controller.
That's it.
No, 50.
Yep.
Yeah, Prahlada Maharaj.
Somebody else
Okay.
can read you.
Yeah.
Somebody else can
Okay.
take that at text 50. Who else
Okay.
wants to read? Thank you so much. That was very good.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else wants to read these last 5? Got a few more. Going once. Ram Raghava, I think it's up to you. Oh, I see Raghavati. She's jumping. I mean, you guys are going to have to fight over this. Go for it, Ram Raghava.
No, Mataji can go ahead.
Oh, what a humble soul.
Okay. If a demigod, demon, human being, yaksha, gandharva, or anyone within the universe renders service to the lotus feet of Mukunda, who can deliver liberation, he is actually situated in the most auspicious condition of life, exactly like us, the Mahajans, headed by Prahlada Maharaj. My dear friends, O sons of the demons, you cannot please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by performing perfect brahmanas, demigods, or great saints, or by becoming perfectly good in etiquette or vast learning. None of these qualifications can awaken the pleasure of the Lord, nor by charity, austerity, sacrifice, cleanliness, or vows can one satisfy the Lord. The Lord is pleased only if one is unflinchingly, unalloyed devotion to him. Without sincere devotional service, everything is simply a show. My dear friends, O sons of the demons, in the same favorable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, take to devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present everywhere as the super soul of all living entities. O my friends, O sons of demons, everyone, including you, the yakshas and rakshasas, the unintelligent women, sudras, and cowherd men, the birds, the lower animals, and the sinful living entities, can revive his original eternal spiritual life and exist forever simply by accepting the principles of bhakti yoga. In this material world, to render service to the lotus feet of Govinda, the cause of all causes, and to see him everywhere is the only goal of life. This much alone is the ultimate goal of human life, as explained by all revealed scriptures.
That is wonderful, wonderful stuff. Wow. Prahlada Maharaj. I mean, he cuts right through all the haze, all the fog. If there were any question, all you got to do is go read this chapter one more time, and all your questions will be answered. Wow. Well, that's beautiful. This is definitely one of the most profound studies in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's so much here that we could unpack. If we want to, we got 30 minutes. So what questions, what points, what illuminations? Anybody got anything they want to share? Please do. Or interject at any point, if you want to. Because all we're going to do is kind of recap this chapter a little bit. There's quite a bit here. And Ram Raghava, you got anything you want to start with?
Sure, there's so many points, but a couple of things that really stood out to me. One was in text 42. I just love the way Prahlada Maharaj explains that as soon as you try for happiness, that's when your misery begins. when you're not trying to be happy, the happiness that you're entitled to will come according to your previous karma. And that is such a hard thing to practice in real life, because our tendency is to want to do this, want to get this, want to get that, because you think that's going to make you happy, that's going to make you situated in a position that you want. But if you think about it, that's when the misery begins, because you're trying to control things that you can't control. So, and that's a hard lesson to learn, but it's very observable, but it's hard to understand, but very, very observable. You can see that through experience. And then another point was in text 39, Prahlada Maharaj explains, or he's talking about devotional services, happiness. And one time, you can search through the Veda base, any of these words, happiness and devotional service. And there's one instance where a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada that how come sometimes I'm not happy when I'm performing devotional service? How come sometimes I don't feel happy? And Srila Prabhupada explains, that means if you're not happy, that means you're not a real devotee. And he quoted the verse from Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na Sochati na Kankshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. That to be situated in devotional service, you have to be on the Brahma Bhuta platform, which is signified by no hankering and no lamentation. That means you're not going to be unhappy. If you're really connected in devotional service, you won't be unhappy. And that's such a nice thing to know, because all you have to do is think about that and get connected again, and you'll be happy. And one last point, if you'll bear with me. Text 19 and 20. Prahlada Maharaj, the translation says Atma refers to, what's the word? Oh, 19. Atma refers to the Supreme Lord or the living entities. So the thing that I thought about was Srila Prabhupada says, and you can research this on the Veda base also, that his translations are not ABC translations. So in other words, they're not just translating the word and then explaining according to grammatical understanding or something. These are realizations, and Prabhupada is explaining. So sometimes you may find a word that can mean more than one thing. So how do you know in that particular instance what it's referring to? Because in another place, Srila Prabhupada explains that Atma can refer to the body, the mind, or the soul. So impersonalists tend to interpret sometimes these things to equate the soul and the super soul. But these understandings have to come from a bona fide spiritual master. And that's what the importance of approaching a bona fide spiritual master is. Because you can't just learn these just by learning the words and having grammatical scholarship. Those are realized purports coming from Prabhupada.
Wonderful. Very wonderful. Yeah, to hear from the mouth of self-realized soul, pure devotee of the Lord, it only takes just a moment of that association. Even in Narada Muni's case, he only took the remnants one time of the pure devotees by their permission. And in doing so, he became, completely enlightened. Now, he also heard all this information while in the womb of his mother, right? And he was there, and Narada Muni was giving this discourse to his mom, and he also heard this in the womb. And he was blessed by Narada Muni to remember this. So this is quite wonderful. Even though he said she had forgotten, he said he was blessed to always remember. So, Ram Raghava, go back to that first point and remind me what that was, because there was a couple of things that popped into my mind when you said those things. You had several things in a row, so unfortunately, I'm not sure I can retain all that.
One point was devotional service means you'll be happy. Right. Devotional service. Another point was when you endeavor to be happy, that's happiness comes when you're not trying to be happy.
There you go. So the whole purpose of yoga is really to become desireless. So the idea is the soul has to be active at every moment. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, right? And one can't even be inactive for a moment. It even requires activities to maintain the material body. You can't just sit down, you'll wither away. So all these things have to be done. So what they don't understand is that the activities that are being done in devotional life and bhakti yoga are free from all desires, all material desires. So that is true desirelessness, is to be desiring only Krishna, desiring only God. And in a person in that situation actually becomes desireless in the material world. They desire everything for the Lord in one of 5 rasas that we had just come back from a big festival on. And these are very wonderful rasas because they exist all around us. Parenthood, friendship, servitude, neutrality, or beloved, intimate relationship like that. All those relationships are available to us and they all provide happiness. So what Prahlada Maharaj was saying at the end of the chapter was, these pleasures in the material world have a beginning and the end. And therefore, really in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says the wise don't partake of these type pleasures because they know perfectly well they have a beginning and the end. And all of them end up in total loss and in total misery, ultimately. All the paraphernalia that we acquire in this world is lost at the time of death. There's nothing you can't take any of it with you. As a matter of fact, your possessions, what you're looking at now is your life, no matter what it is, will be divided amongst, whoever at the time of your death. And your body even belongs to others. It either belongs to the fire, it becomes ash, or it becomes to the belly of an animal, becomes stool, or it becomes earth or dust, as they say. So in that situation, you don't own anything. Everything you have is a gift of God. Everything you see is provided to you by God, either your father, your best friend, your lover, your whatever, your beloved child, or you're neutral in the situation. You've got these opportunities to know God in these different ways. And specifically, we were talking about Sankhya Yoga, the analytical study. He talks about Sankhya, analytical study, which Kapila brought forward, an incarnation of Kapila, to talk about the analytical study of everything. And he goes on to say, this is not it, this is not it, this is not it, like that. Until you find, oh, this is it. Then you know what is real and what is illusion. So very, very good points, Ram Raghav. Always very, very nice. Thank you so much for bringing that to life. Any other question or point that anybody wants to make? So I'll just start running back through this, and if you hear something you want to just jump in, just go ahead and jump in. You don't have to raise your hand, just interrupt. So now Hiranyakashipu in this chapter had already left to go do his austerities because he wanted to become the king of the universe, right? Want to live forever like that. And so while he was gone, what happened? What happened? He's gone. What happened? His kingdom was invaded by the demigods. They destroyed his palace. They took his wife away. Okay, he's standing there with his arms upraised in this austere posture, and he's being eaten by the ants. Brahma said, he was impressed. He said, you've been able to keep your life air within the marrow of your bones. He said, I'm impressed. Yeah, you can have whatever you want. Whatever I can grant, you can have. So we know that Hiranyakashipu did his best to trick him. It didn't work. We're going to find out in the next chapter that it didn't work. I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. It didn't work. So the next chapter, you got to be here for that because that's when the Lord Nrsimhadeva slays the king of the demons, right? So, but anyway, they wanted to keep her because in the womb of his wife was the seed of the demon. But Narada let them know. Now, Narada's always flying around, starting some problems somewhere. I see some hand up. Is there somebody who wants to say something? If you do, just chime in. Come on. Anyway, so he's a catalyst, right? He's a troublemaker. And he's down there, and but he's telling him, "Oh, don't worry about it," because he's pure devotee, and so this girl is sinless, so she should be released immediately, and so she's coming to my ashram, basically. And the demigod said, "Yes, sir. whatever you say, Nard, we know it's the right thing." So he takes her to the ashram, and she stays there in his protection until Hiranyakashipu returns. Until her husband comes in. Woman has to be protected in this situation by her children. Here it's being protected by her spiritual master, right? Or her husband or her parents or whatever it might be. So they rendered service, and Narada instructed them in the transcendental science, not in any mundane knowledge, but in transcendental knowledge, free from all material contamination. That's the key. What Narada told them was free from all material contamination. No material contamination. No tinge of the three modes of material nature, ignorance, passion, and goodness affecting this, right? So, and then Prahlada was blessed not to forget this information. And he talks about the changes of the body. He goes through this whole thing. And, in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about Dehanosmen Yatada He Kamanang Javaranjara. And then he goes on to the next verse, Najayate Mariyate Vakadachin, like that. Nayam Bhutva Bhavitava Nabuya. So birth, existence, growth, transformation, dwindling, and death. This is the way Prahlada gave it to us. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's very similar. Childhood to boyhood to youth to old age, and then to death, and then to the change of the body. So he talks about that at length in there. And but he goes on to say there's no change for the spirit soul. No change for the spirit soul. No problem. There's no change for the spirit soul. Don't worry about it. So he tells them that the individuals that are the spirit souls are uncovered from this material body. In other words, they're not covered by the material body. They're self-illuminated. They are the Atma, like you talked about a minute ago, Ram Raghav. You're talking about the Supreme Atma and the Jivatma. There's two of us, right? And it talks about that these are the cause of all these causes. Now, we know that God is the cause of all causes, actually. But when you desire something, it creates a cause, and that would create an effect. If you desire something material, then you will get a material result. And to get a material result, you have to have a material body. Sorry. You got to have a material body. So you may think, well, that's great. That's no problem. Maybe I'll be beautiful. Maybe I'll be famous. Maybe I'll be rich. Maybe who knows what you'll be. It's a razor's edge, Prabhupada said. Don't take chances like that. It's a very dark place, and there's a lot of predators lurking in the material world. And just one little false mistake, one little false move can create the most pain and suffering you could ever possibly imagine. And we see that every time we turn on the news or talk to our friends. We hear about the lives of people who are undergoing these types of reactions. So, but he says that they really have nothing to do with the body at all. The Atma has nothing to do with the body at all. The body is 24 elements. The Atma is the 25th element, and the super soul, the supreme soul, is the 26th element, Prabhupada says in the purport. I thought that was a very interesting point that Prabhupada made. So, but when all the elements are finished and they're dissolved and they go into an unmanifested state, the soul remains, just like the supreme soul remains. Krishna says that there's another world, which is remains after all this world is destroyed. That world is self-illuminated. So when we talk about self-illuminated souls, that's what he's talking about in this. So unfortunately, though, even though we have nothing to do with the body, that we're spirit soul, we have a mantra. And do you know what the mantra is? And we chanted it for trillions of births. That mantra is, I am the body, and everything in relation to the body is mine. Hey! How's that working out for you? That's the big question. How's that working out for all of those people who believed that falsehood, that lie? How's that working out? It's not working out at all. So the idea is to understand if you have some knowledge, if you have some spiritual knowledge, just like they say that a person who's into to the metals, what is called metallurgy, they know how to extract gold from the ore. They know how to get it out. They know how to process all this stuff. So a person versed in spiritual knowledge by the spiritual master like Narada Muni, for an example, or Srila Prabhupada, for an example, or anybody in the lineage, would understand the process of how to see the difference between the soul and the body. They must know the process. They got to know the 11 senses. They got to know the 5 elements. They got to know that one soul exists within this during the 16 transformations. Now go read that one again. Prabhupada delineates this in that. So he says we must know these processes. We must know who we are because we're conditioned by the gross and the subtle body. And the soul is being affected and drug around by this illusion and the desire that we have based in that illusion, right? So what needs to happen? Kapila says in the Sankhya philosophy, and Prahlada says here, that we have to find the soul through analytical study. You got to find it through analytical study. It's called Sankhya Yoga. Kapila initiated this. And the question is, what? Is this it? Is this? No, this is not it. This is not it. You said this earlier where you're reading a minute ago. This is not it. This is not it. We have to find what the soul is distinct from these 24 elements, distinct from matter, distinct from the false ego, distinct from the intelligence, distinct, from the illusion of the mind and its processes as well. So by doing analytical studies, they're in 3 stages, actually: wakefulness, dreaming, and in deep sleep. These are the 3 states of life that we experience. Okay, wakefulness, dreaming, or deep sleep. These are 3 states. But because these states are polluted by the modes of material ignorance or the modes of material nature, we're steeped in ignorance. We don't know who we are. We're identifying with all these dreams, these illusions. We believe it. And therefore, simply by believing that instead of the words of Prahlada Maharaj, who asked the students, please believe in my words. When I tell you, have faith in my words, is what he's saying, right? He said that. So we have mentally concocted philosophies, dreams. One thing I was going to say about what you were saying earlier, Ramragha, is that people are so frustrated. They don't want any more desires. They just want to forget it all. So they come up with this voidist philosophy or this impersonalist philosophy or that I am God and I merge with God. All of these things. These are all bogus nonsense philosophies that don't actually satisfy the soul, which is active at every moment and needs engagement. Desirelessness doesn't mean to be desireless of service to Krishna. We should be filled with desires, millions and millions of desires to serve the Lord and his devotees, the spiritual master in particular. So that's how this process works. By the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the best way to understand all of this information and come out of this ignorance is tadvidi pranipratena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te gyanam gyaninas tattvadarshana. Accept the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively. The spiritual master has seen the truth. Therefore, he can impart knowledge to you. It's just like Ram Raghava was saying a minute ago. It's not just some schematic of learning this and that. You need to hear it from the mouth of a self-realized soul. So the spiritual master is self-realized soul, and he can impart this knowledge. So the process that he explains, the best process of all, is that process which is delineated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself in the Shastra. And we all know that famous verse, 1866, I believe it is, where abandon all varieties of religion and just simply surrender to me. I will protect you. Do not fear. Right? That verse, a very, very important verse, what Sarvadharma Pratyaja Mami Kam Saranamraja, right? That verse. Abandon all varieties of religion. Become attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Man mana bhava mad bhakto, right? Always think of me. Offer everything to me. And you surely will come to me if you do these processes. He goes on to talk about the 9 processes of devotional service that we can render. And we can develop our love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead by doing that. Who, by the way, is in the core of everyone's heart as the super soul, as the best friends, right? So to be able to actually meditate on the Lord, we have to really control, we have to quieten our mind. What are the things that we have to quiet? The first thing is lust. We have to quiet lust. We have to quiet anger. We have to quiet greed. We have to quiet illusion. We have to quiet jealousy. We have to just get rid of all of this nonsense that's dragging us from one body to the next. Control the mind, overcome it, alleviate those things from your life, which create madness and illusion anyway. And we have to get over those items. Now, text 33, let's see if we can flip to that fairly quickly. Text 33, I wanted to bring out quickly for you. By these activities, one is able to cut down the influence of the enemies, namely lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and jealousy. And when thus situated, one can actually render service to the Lord. In this way, one surely attains the platform of loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a very, 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 very important point, because Krishna talks about controlling the mind, the senses, that they're more restless than the wind, and so forth and so on. That if we don't get control of this, then we're not in yoga. We cannot make advancement in that. We can't develop our ultimate love of Godhead unless we're able to control that, right? So to attain this devotion that we're talking about is a great boon, because by attaining devotion, we can actually experience happiness, right? Now, if you read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll find out that the Lord Chaitanya and all of his associates were experiencing hair standing on end. They were experiencing ecstatic horripilations, emotions, tears flowing from the eyes like waves, like torrents, right? Dancing, loud chanting, laughing, happiness, and sometimes forgetting convention of society altogether and doing these things. As a matter of fact, Lord Chaitanya only left these 8 verses basically. And what he says is in the, 6th one? Nayanam galarasridarya, varanam gadgadarudayagira, pulikar nichitam vapukada tavanama grahane bhavishyati. Oh, my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs on my body stand on end at the recitation of your holy name? So this is the attitude that a devotee should have. Ultimately, we kind of lose our desire in the material world for anything temporary. Instead, we're almost like we're haunted by this longing to be with the Supreme Personality, to be with the most beautiful, the most wealthy, the most famous, the most powerful, right? Yet the most renounced. We want to be with that personality. And we're haunted as if by a ghost, it says here. And so if you look at text 35, he says, thus he expresses his transcendental jubilation. When a person becomes like a person haunted by a ghost, he laughs very loudly and he chants about the qualities of the Lord. Sometimes he sits to perform meditation and he offers respects to every living entity, considering him a devotee of the Lord. Constantly breathing heavily, he becomes careless of social etiquette and loudly chants like a madman, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hari Rama, Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari, Haribo. See? And that is his transcendental ecstasy. And he begins to feel that more and more. It's like Rama Raghava said, if you're not happy in devotional service, you got to go back, and you're obviously not doing the process correctly. You got to get fired up. You got to go back and straighten it out. Find out what you're not weeding out of your garden and pull that out. Okay. So in that condition, though, after constantly remembering the Lord's pastimes, his name, his fame, his form, his activity, all that stuff, at that time, he actually achieves the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. That's what Prahlada said. In that state, he can achieve the lotus feet of the Lord. And that is a very wonderful position for us all to be in, if we can do that. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, he says, engage your mind always in thinking of me, offer obeisances, worship me, be completely absorbed in me, you surely will come to me. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna discusses that. And also, he's wondering how that a person could even become addicted to material paraphernalia, like family, friends, society, nation, home, animals, paraphernalia, his various transportation and all this kind of stuff. He's wondering how they can do that for sense enjoyment because they're always only frustrated by those activities. So the devotees don't take pleasure in that. And all paraphernalia is temporary. So what is it? What use has it to a person who's actually self-realized? The heavenly planets, even if you go there, Abrahma Bhuvanal Loka, they're all places of death, wherein, repeated birth and death and misery take place. So those are not the goal either. So he goes on to say there's no inebriety in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, there's no thing keeping you back from loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Devotional service can be performed anywhere. There's no restriction like that, very little. So acting for development or economic development and sense gratification, one simply gets the opposite of what he desires. Just like you were saying earlier, Ramrag, those persons who want to be happy and pursue happy are immediately miserable. Immediately. Because this isn't the way I wanted it. It didn't work out exactly like I wanted. I wanted this. I didn't get exactly that. And you've seen little children, they'll scream and cry and kick the floor, and they'll throw a temper tantrum. We see that happening on the road. Well, I couldn't get to my sense gratification quick enough. Therefore, I'm angry with you. I think I'll shoot you. Maybe I'll stab you a while first, This is how serious they are about their illusion. None of it has any validity. None of it. So we desire happiness, and we can only be happy if we don't desire material happiness. If we desire the happiness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Spiritual Master, we automatically become happy because we water the root of the tree, and then all of the other parts of the body are watered. We can go into that for a long time, but we won't. So he says, compared to the ocean of happiness, none of these things have any value. Zero. Try to imagine an ocean of happiness that awaits us once we cross over on the boat, the sturdy boat of this Bhakti Yoga process to the other side. We cross over the ocean of nescience, and then we can experience that ocean of happiness, right? So these desires for sense gratification are paltry, and even the bugs have this pleasure of sex gratification and food and like that, flavors and taste. And it all ends up in hardship and misery and ultimately in death. So why would we want to create another body from the activities we're doing in this body? If you know that this body is getting older, if you know the body is suffering, and if you know the body is becoming diseased, you see people dying all around you. Hey, listen, wake up to the reality that this is not going to be a pleasant ride in the material world. Don't create another body. Don't go through all those miseries of repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. Instead, concentrate, and not on dharma, artha, karma, and moksha. Concentrate on pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because everything is dependent on his disposition. Just like if you have a little child and the little child does something nice, he pleases the father. Father goes overboard to do something nice for the child. That's because his disposition is favorable to the child. In one chapter, we're reading that just the sidelong glances of the Lord, the smile of the Lord is there for the benediction of the devotee. You want that smile, you want that sidelong glance. And here's the bottom line, okay? This is the bottom line of all of this study. It doesn't matter. The Srimad Bhagavatam will enlighten us to self-realization, but the whole study boils down to this. And Prahlada Maharaj, as a simple child, has really hit on the absolute truth. And that is that you have to learn to see Krishna as your very own self. You know how you serve yourself? You know how you cleanse your body? You know how you'll do things for yourself you really won't do for anybody else, hardly, right? You know how you want the best food for your body, you want the best clothing for your body, you want the best environment for your body, you want the best home for your body, you want the most beautiful family and children for your body. All these things you do for your body. This service that you have, this attachment, this love you have for yourself and for your body, you should give that same attachment and love and respect and appreciation and service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because the Lord is in your core of your heart. He is your very self. So you should be treated as your very self, and you should see him everywhere, all the time. You should never be separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's in everything you see. So you can revive this life, this eternal life of bliss and happiness by this process of bhakti yoga. It's that simple. It's the only goal in life. It's confirmed in all the scriptures. They all agree with that. It doesn't matter how much sacrifice, charity, austerity, all of that stuff that you do, even though they're not giving up, they don't please the Lord one little bit as much as devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead with love and affection does for the Lord. And the Lord goes on to say in 1154, Bhaktichwanan yayasakya ham evam vidorjuna Gyantum drastum chitat vena. Pravestum cha parantapa. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood. Standing before you and can thus be seen directly, only in this way can you ever enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So I don't know that there's any better study of that than what Prahlada Maharaj has given us in this chapter. And we should read this chapter literally every day, because this chapter is deathless. It produces deathlessness. He says you can live eternally in the ocean of bliss simply by practicing bhakti yoga. What does it mean? Okay, what are we talking about? We got a voice. What are we talking? We're using it for Krishna. You could use it for all nonsense, but we use it for Krishna. You got food, offer it to Krishna. Came from Krishna. You got a house, give it to the spiritual master. He knows what to do with it. That's what it says. Give it all to the spiritual master, because he knows what to do with it. So, guys, that's all I got for tonight. We're at 8:03, and I'm doing good. Maybe we should just go one chapter at a time, right? I can't do 2 chapters in an hour and a half. There's no way. There's just too much content. You guys are beautiful, and I love all y'all. Y'all are my extended family out there, and I appreciate you so much. I can't wait to see you very, very soon. And I'm worried about your health, so I want to pray for all blessings upon your health to live another 100 years, or another 90 some odd years anyway. We need you. We can't do without you. We appreciate you so much, and we'll always be praying for your health and your happiness. And of course, your eternal life is guaranteed very nicely just by hearing these discourses. It says so throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam over and over and over and over again. You can depend on that.
By the way, I just wanted to mention that Viprahita Prabhu, when he was in the hospital all 4 days, he made sure he chanted his 16 rounds every day, no matter what. So,
Wow. That's too good. That's beautiful.
Well done. That's
Well done.
very hard when you're sick like that, isn't it?
Yeah. There's one thing in the Bhagavatam it says there's a prayer. It says, "Oh Lord, when my throat is congested and maybe I'm too sick to even remember you, please don't forget me." So you can count on that. You remind the Lord, look what I've done for you, Lord. What I've tried to do for you. Please don't forget me. And that's okay. That's okay to do like that. So very, very good, guys. Well, thank you so much. Next week, there's going to be a great chapter. Lord Nrsimhadeva kills and slays this demon, Hiranyakashipu. I can't wait to read it. This is the joyous moment we all been waiting for. And of course, the prayers by Prahlada after are also very, very wonderful. Okay. So, any other questions?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Krishna, Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Ram.
Rama. Hare Rama.
Rama.
Rama. Hare.
Hare. Thank you so much. See you next week, guys.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.